And good evening, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Tonight, Saturday. And Saturday brings us to another story time. We finished up our 3 books that started the Apprentice Adept series. And now for something completely different. Tonight we're going to be starting into the debut novel of author Anna Rowe. Here you go. Right over to the right there. Anna and I connected through Goodreads as I was looking for authors who wanted to be able to have their books read live on stream. And, well, she decided that I was an appropriate person to do that. So let's tell you, to start with, a little bit about Anna. It's from the book, so, Anna Rowe lives in Cornwall, Ontario, once part of historic Upper Canada, with her 3 daughters. She holds a writing certificate from the University of Western Ontario and works as a dedicated teacher. In 2025, she attended Royal Ascot in the Royal Enclosure as a foreign national, an experience that inspired her debut novel, Murder at Maplewood Manor, where a horse plays a central role. In her spare time, Anna enjoys jogging, listening to audiobooks and podcasts, and exploring new places through travel. Giving back. Now, this is something that you guys may know is near and dear to my heart, as half of the money that comes in from my streaming goes back to support Project New Hope. So, giving back, near and dear to my heart. If you want any more information about that, projectnewhopema.org. I am a disabled veteran. They are a veteran and military support organization. Seemed like a good cause to me. But anyway, giving back. A portion of proceeds from this book supports wildlife conservation. 1% of sales from Murder at Maplewood Manor by Anna Rowe will be donated to Tusk Trust, supporting vital efforts to protect endangered species and preserve Africa's natural heritage. Hey, good evening, Susan Morgan. How are you? And so there we go. That gives you a little bit of an idea of what we are starting with tonight. And so I am excited to be able to support and help debut a new author out there. So glad to have you guys here with me for it, and hope you guys will enjoy it as much as I think you are going to. So you guys know, at least those of you guys who have been with me through some of these live streams, that normally I break in between every chapter and we discuss. Probably going to go a couple of chapters on this one because the chapters are a good deal shorter than what we are typically used to running into. So we'll do a couple of chapters and then we'll stop and we can talk about it and ask questions and give thoughts or feedback or anything else as we go through. And if you don't have any thoughts, I'll still take a brief moment to gather myself back up for the next time through. So let me do something really quick. Come on, Frosty Tools. So let's start out with our disclaimer, and then we will get ready to jump into the book. Just a reminder that this book is available on Amazon. You can pick it up in Kindle format, which is the way that I'm reading it. I believe that it is also on there as a physical book you can get. Or if you happen to be a Kindle Unlimited member, pick it up, read along with us. At each page that you turn in a Kindle Unlimited book helps support the author of that book. So, hey, why not help to give back, right? Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, events, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. While certain historical figures, such as members of royal families, may be referenced or portrayed, their inclusion is entirely fictionalized. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, is purely coincidental, and no factual assertions are intended. The story is not intended to depict real events or represent the views, actions, or personalities of any real individual, royal or otherwise. The author does not intend to imply any endorsement, affiliation, or factual account of the private lives of any individuals named in this book. All portrayals are fictional and do not reflect real world beliefs, actions, or events. There you guys go. So, before we get started, any thoughts, questions, anything that you guys want to know before we get ourselves started on Murder at Maplewood Manor by Anna Rowe? All right, fantastic. If you guys do have questions, again, I will read through, and then as we get through a couple of chapters, I will stop and we will have time to discuss if you want to discuss with me. Of course, at all times, you guys are welcome and encouraged to discuss with each other, so that way you guys can keep yourselves going as you do it. All right, everybody. Sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into Murder at Maplewood Manor by Anna Rowe. One thing first. Turn down my fan. It was really loud in my ear over there. All right, guys, here we go. Chapter 1: Of Hooves, Havoc, and a Hint of Cinnamon. In the charmingly lopsided village of Maplewood, nestled between two brooks, one maple syrup cartel, and a regrettably vocal flock of geese, the only thing more potent than the afternoon tea was the gossip. Mrs. Edwina Featherstone, widow of a colonial tea magnate and self-appointed custodian of good breeding, had just taken her seat in the drawing-room of Maplewood Manor. The fire crackled with aristocratic restraint. A three-tiered tray bore a new batch of lemon tarts shaped like miniature bonnets. The Darjeeling was piping hot and just dark enough to judge the neighbors by. Edwina raised her cup, sighed contentedly, and was about to indulge in the scandal of Mrs. Crabapple's newest gardening boy when the doors burst open. "Madam, the Duke is in the parlor." Mr. Potts, the footman, shouted, sweat already dewing his brow. "I assume," Edwina replied, adjusting her lace cuffs without looking up, "you mean the horse and not an actual nobleman with the audacity to arrive unannounced." "Yes, ma'am. Duke of Thunder, he's in the tea parlor, and there's a situation." From the foyer came a gasp, a clatter, and a child's delighted squeal. "He's wearing a hat!" Two children, Ruby, age 9, and Tobias, 7, had wandered in from their lesson with the governess and were peeking around the corner, eyes wide. "This is better than arithmetic," Tobias whispered. Colonel Horatio Blight, Edwina's old friend and occasional foil in village matters and wars, rose from his wingback chair with a grunt. "If the blasted beast is sipping Earl Grey again, I shall request combat pay." They followed Potts into the parlor. The floor bore unmistakable hoofprints in the Aubusson carpet. A vase trembled. A teacup had met its end. And in the center of the room stood the Duke of Thunder, a coal-black stallion with a noble head and an even nobler attitude. He snorted indignantly at a platter of watercress sandwiches. But that wasn't the shocking part. On the horse's back was a man, strapped to the saddle, dead, wearing crimson riding attire. A silver asparagus fork protruded from his neck like a terribly improper cravat pin. "Oh dear," Edwina murmured. "I do believe someone's gone and expired in my parlor. How inconvenient." "And dramatic," Horatio added, peering at the corpse. "Who dies mid-sandwich delivery?" From the hallway, the children gasped audibly. Ruby whispered, "Is he sleeping?" Luis Calderon, the Spanish writing instructor temporarily boarding in the estate's west wing, appeared in the doorway. "Perdón, señora, I heard commotion." His eyes flicked to the dead man, widened, then narrowed. "You know him?" Edwina asked. Luis hesitated, then said softly, "I believe he trained once in Juarez, but this is no accident." "No," Edwina agreed. "This, dear Luis, is a murder, brought directly to my parlor by horse." Wellington the cat strolled in, sniffed the dead man's boots, and promptly sat on his chest. "Potts," Edwina said with a steely calm, "do summon Miss Quill, and kindly inform the constable that he may want to bring more than one notebook." "And the children?" Potts asked. Edwina turned to Ruby and Tobias, who were now attempting to poke the horse with a ruler. "Give them ginger biscuits and tell them it's a dramatic reenactment of Canadian Confederation." The mystery had begun. Chapter 2. Ink, Intrigue, and the Arrival of Miss Quill. 23 minutes later, Miss Tabitha Quill burst through the manor's arched entryway in a flurry of ink-streaked skirts and flying bonnet ribbons. As Maplewood's unofficial historian, record-keeper, and general menace to obfuscation, she had an uncanny habit of showing up just after the worst had occurred. "I came as soon as I heard," she declared breathlessly, pausing only to give Tobias a pat on the head and to adjust her spectacles, which had become alarmingly foggy. Mrs. Featherstone met her with a thin-lipped smile. "A man is dead in my tea parlor, Tabitha. Murdered, I might add, and delivered by horse." "And with a rather theatrical flair," added Colonel Blight. "There's a fork involved." Tabitha peered into the parlor and gave a low whistle. "Asparagus fork? That's a four-pronger. Not subtle. And crimson coat? We're talking message here, not murder." Luis Calderon stood by the fireplace, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He nodded a faint greeting to Tabitha. "He was trained in Spain, rode in Seville once, but I believe he came to Canada for opportunity." "Dead men often do," Tabitha muttered, crouching beside the body. "Still warm. That puts the time of death at less than an hour ago. And here, a bit of lemon oil on his gloves. Odd, he wasn't preparing tea. He was hiding something." Edwina raised a brow. "Or leaving a trail." Outside the parlor, Ruby and Tobias reenacted the scene with toy soldiers, narrating in dramatic whispers. "And then the fork of doom struck. Pow!" Tabitha stood, dusting her hands. "We'll need to search the saddle. Carefully." Horatio nodded and motioned for the footman to bring gloves. "Can't let fingerprints smudge a good murder." Wellington leaped off the corpse and sauntered over to the saddlebag, pawing at the flap with a disturbingly knowing glance. "Aha!" Tabitha said, reaching inside. "There's a letter. Wax seal, odd script, and lemon juice? Secret ink? How deliciously espionage," Edwina said, holding it over a steaming pot. Words began to appear faintly on the page. "The deed is forged. Midnight. North Gate. Burn after reading." Luis and Tabitha exchanged a glance. This wasn't just a local squabble, Lewis murmured. This man was involved in something bigger. Edwina straightened her back. Then so are we. Horatio groaned. Does it involve sneaking through fields again? I still have burrs from last autumn. We'll need to visit Lord Hawthorne, Tabitha said. His livery matches the dead man's waistcoat. If anyone knows why a noble-looking stranger ends up in a Maplewood parlour, it's the man with too many horses and not enough secrets. I shall change gloves, Edwina declared. Blood and Battenberg simply do not mix. The plot thickened, and in Maplewood, it always thickened with scandal, cinnamon, and just a touch of saddle wax. Chapter 3. Chartreuse Sandals and Cravat Diplomacy. The following morning arrived with indecent cheeriness, as if the sun were oblivious to the murder that had darkened the household less than a day before. Edwina Featherstone found the clear skies an affront. Colonel Blight, still grumbling over his porridge, muttered, The cat stared at me all night, as if I were next. Wellington yawned elaborately from the sideboard. We leave in an hour, Edwina declared, selecting gloves from her morning drawer. Today we call on Lord Hawthorne. Tactfully. Their carriage rolled toward Hawthorne Hall, a structure less designed for comfort than for intimidation through excessive cornicing. The children waved them off dramatically, shouting, Solve the murder! Bring back biscuits! Upon arrival, they were greeted by an unusually sullen footman with sideburns so sharp they could slice crumpets. Lord Hawthorne is expecting you. In the morning room, Lord Jasper Hawthorne reclined like a man auditioning to be painted. His chartreuse dressing gown glowed ominously, and his cravat could have supported a small circus tent. My dear Edwina, he drawled, you've come to accuse me of murder so early? I haven't even insulted the bishop yet. We're here about your horse, Edwina said. Specifically, the Duke of Thunder and the gentleman he transported like a morbid telegram. Jasper sighed. Oh, yes, the corpse delivery. Unseemly business. The Frenchman, Claude Bellamy. Not one of mine, technically. Freelance. Tabitha stepped forward. He wore your colors. I let him stable here, Jasper said. Seemed charming. Terrible taste in waistcoats. Lewis, who had joined them under the pretense of assessing the Duke's condition, stepped forward. He trained in Juarez, and he mentioned the Ascot. That got Jasper's attention. He said Ascot needed fresh blood, Lewis continued, and that Canada had more to offer than anyone realized. Jasper stood abruptly. He knew too much. Not about horses, about people. Edwina narrowed her eyes. Did he ever mention a forged deed? He spoke of land deals, Jasper admitted, and how some titles were merely paper and ink. Said it didn't matter where you were born, only what you claimed. And now he's dead, Blight added. Jasper waved a hand. As are many dreamers. Do stay for sherry, won't you? No, Edwina said crisply, but thank you. Back in the carriage, Tabitha turned to Edwina. He knows more. He's rattled. And scared, Lewis added. Bellamy wasn't just involved. He was pulling strings. Then we pull harder, Edwina said. We visit Lady Plunkett next, and I'd wager she's got more than rhubarb in her cellar. The carriage wheels clattered onward, the mystery deepening with every elegant jostle. Chapter 4. Tea with a Side of Blackmail. The Plunkett estate, a sprawling Gothic confection shaped like an afterthought and decorated like a French aristocrat's fever dream, stood bathed in suspicious sunlight. Its battlements were entirely decorative, its gargoyles too smug by half, and its owner, Lady Henrietta Plunkett, entirely too aware of both. As Edwina Featherstone, Colonel Blight, Tabitha Quill, and Louis Calderon approached the estate, even the children peering through the estate gates whispered, "That's where the ghosts go to gossip." They were greeted by a manservant so pale and powdered he might have been carved from meringue. "Her ladyship awaits," he intoned with a disdainful sniff. "Mind the peacock, he's unpredictable." The peacock, named Reginald, greeted them with an ear-splitting shriek and a flurry of sapphire feathers. Louis narrowly avoided a beak to the shin. Inside, the drawing room looked like a Baroque ballroom had collided with a milliner's warehouse. Gilded sconces, velvet in all shades of emotional trauma, and a collection of porcelain monkeys glared from every shelf. Lady Henrietta Plunkett swept in wearing a gown the precise shade of betrayal. "Edwina," she said, air-kissing with military precision, "how galling to see you under circumstances so unscheduled." "Henrietta," Edwina replied, "your estate remains as memorable as ever." Introductions were made. Louis bowed. Tabitha complimented a particularly unsettling vase. "We're here," Edwina said, "about Claude Bellamy." Henrietta blinked. "That old rooster of a man? I paid him. Briefly." "For what exactly?" asked Tabitha. "Documents," Henrietta replied. "He said he could acquire irregular deeds. There's a parcel near the maple grove I wanted. Old rights. Bellamy said he could help." "Did he mention forged titles? Royal races?" Edwina leaned in. Henrietta hesitated. "He said he had contacts abroad, that certain bloodlines were negotiable." Louis raised an eyebrow. "He spoke of Ascot." "Briefly," she admitted, "but always in riddles. Said the real races weren't won on turf, but on parchment." "Was he blackmailing you?" Edwina asked bluntly. Henrietta flinched, then smiled. "He tried. Sent me a letter. Claimed to have insurance. Said if he vanished, the truth would follow." She rose and retrieved a drawer from an armoire shaped like a pouting cherub. From it, she produced a folded letter sealed with plain wax. Edwina opened it carefully. It read, "If I vanish, the truth rides with thunder. Look to the saddle. The names are hidden where nobility will never kneel." Tabitha paled. "He stored something in the saddle? Documents? A list?" "Or leverage," Louis murmured. Colonel Blight frowned. "We need to speak to the constable. Check that saddle." Wellington the cat, who had slipped in unnoticed, batted at the note with clear disdain. Lady Plunkett poured herself sherry. "I didn't kill him, but someone did. And if they know you're asking questions, you'll be next." Outside, the peacock shrieked again. Edwina stood. "Thank you, Henrietta. This has been most informative." "Of course, darling," she said sweetly. "Try not to get murdered before Thursday. I hear the pastries will be exquisite." Back in the carriage, the team fell silent. Tabitha clutched the letter. Lewis finally broke the quiet. "We are not just chasing a murderer. We are chasing a secret someone buried in a saddle." Edwina nodded. "And if Bellamy was right, that saddle holds the key to a racing conspiracy with international reach." Colonel Blight cracked his knuckles. "Then it's time we took the gloves off." Edwina arched a brow. "Not before tea. Even scandal must obey propriety." And with that, the mystery galloped forward. Chapter 5. Saddle Secrets and Stable Shadows. The constable, Mr. Edgar Nibbs, was a small, mustachioed man with a fondness for boiled sweets and a deeply conflicted relationship with urgency. He was already at Maplewood Manor when the group returned, having been summoned earlier to catalog the unfortunate corpse. He had not, however, examined the saddle. "It smelled of horse," he explained apologetically. "I thought it best left to the stable-master." "Constable Nibbs," Edwina said, peering down at him with the polite intensity of a hawk examining a mouse. "Someone may have hidden blackmail documents inside that saddle. Possibly names, possibly royalty, possibly about racing fraud, possibly in lemon ink." "I see," he said, and immediately dropped his sweet. Together they proceeded to the stables, where Duke of Thunder stood in noble silence, accepting carrots from Tobias and Ruby, who had made it their mission to train him to nod on cue. "We named the corpse, too," Ruby said. "Sir Pointy." "Excellent," Edwina replied. "Historical accuracy must be encouraged." Lewis and Tabitha carefully undid the saddle, revealing a false bottom. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, were several folded parchments. "This one has a crest," Tabitha said, holding it up. "Hawthorns. But it's wrong. The dates don't match." "Forged titles," Edwina murmured. "Inheritance by illusion." Another paper bore a list of names, various nobles and estate owners. At the bottom, scrawled hastily, was one more name: Featherstone. Everyone turned to Edwina. "Well," she said dryly, "that's awkward." Lewis examined the seal. "These were meant to undermine claims, replace them with loyalists, perhaps tied to betting syndicates, maybe even royal horses." "Then the death of Bellamy was a silent scene," Tabitha said. "He was going to talk," Edwina nodded. "Or sell." The stable door creaked. A shadow passed. Colonel Blight drew his walking stick, which turned out to contain a rather elegant saber. "Show yourself," he barked. A boy, perhaps 12, stepped forward, eyes wide. It was Amos, the orphan stable boy who knew every hoof print by heart. "I saw someone," he whispered. "Night before last. Black coat. Came from the woods. He gave Thunder an apple and tucked something in the saddle. Then left. Didn't speak." "Could you identify him again?" Edwina asked gently. Amos nodded. "He had a limp, and he smelled like varnish." "Interesting," Tabitha mused. "Furniture maker? Or perhaps someone masking another scent?" Constable Nibbs blinked. "Should I draw a sketch?" "Only if your art has improved since the goose theft incident," Edwina said. They gathered the documents, storing them in Tabitha's satchel, which was now one rogue quill away from explosion. We need to lie low, Lewis advised. Whoever did this won't stop until the documents are destroyed. Then we don't hide, Edwina said firmly. We host a gathering. Invite all the suspects. Make it impossible for them to act without exposing themselves. Colonel Blight grinned. A party trap? Delightful! With dancing? Ruby added from atop a hay bale. Tabitha looked concerned. It's risky. So is inaction, Edwina replied. And if someone plans to kill again, they'll do it when everyone is in one place. Lewis folded the documents and tapped them thoughtfully. Then we bait the trap with the truth. And so it was decided. A grand ball at Maplewood Manor. Horses, high society, and hopefully a killer unmasked before the last waltz. All right, first 5 chapters down. What do you guys think so far? Is it intriguing? Do you really want to know what's coming next? You know we're going to find out. Because that's the way, I like it. All right, guys. Take a deep breath, and then we will go ahead and get ourselves started with the next 5 chapters. Here we go. Chapter 6 of Ball Gowns, Blunders, and Blades. The invitation to Maplewood Manor's hastily arranged winter ball were handwritten on creamy vellum, sealed with Edwina's crest, and delivered by Potts with the efficiency of a scandal courier. Ah, said Horatio, inspecting his invitation. We haven't hosted one since the great pudding collapse of 1803. We have more pressing concerns than trifle trauma, Edwina replied. We're baiting a murderer, and possibly a royal spy. Tabitha swept in with 3 gowns on her arm. I've borrowed lace from the Reverend's wife and feathers from the mayor's peacock. No one will recognize me. Lewis, meanwhile, had taken over training the Duke of Thunder to behave regally in case the evening required an equine flourish. Preparations unfolded at breakneck speed. The children decorated the ballroom with absurd enthusiasm, placing every candle slightly askew and sneaking sugared plums when no one watched. Amos, the stable boy, was drafted as assistant cloakroom manager and occasional lookout. By evening, Maplewood Manor glittered like a rumor in full bloom. Guests arrived in carriages drawn by horses that gleamed under gaslight. Lords and ladies, baronets and barmaids mingled uneasily beneath crystal chandeliers. Somewhere, a string quartet tried valiantly to play a gavotte, while avoiding the drunken footman who insisted he knew the violin part. Lady Plunkett arrived in a cloud of orange blossom and malice. Lord Hawthorne in silk and suspicion. Even the vicar made an appearance, mumbling about shepherding the sinful with one hand firmly on the port decanter. Everyone's here, Tabitha whispered to Edwina, which means so is the killer. Lewis adjusted his cufflinks. We must watch for panic. Guilt shows itself when threatened. At the center of the ballroom, under the great chandelier, stood a display. The Duke of Thunder, saddled as he had been the day the corpse arrived, and beside him, a glass case displaying the false documents. We announce them at midnight, Edwina said. Let them squirm until then. As dancing commenced, alliances shifted like sand. Lady Plunkett exchanged barbed pleasantries with Lord Hawthorne. The mayor's wife fainted from scandal-induced vapors. Someone spiked the punch with elderberry wine, and Tobias performed a jig that defied rhythm, reason, and gravity. Lewis danced once with Edwina, once with Tabitha, and once with a mysterious woman in a black veil who vanished after saying, "Not all titles are earned." Did anyone else see her? "What veil?" Horatio blinked. "You've had too much elderberry." At 5 minutes to midnight, the chandelier flickered. A scream rang out. In the cloakroom, Amos stood over a toppled coat rack, eyes wide. "Someone tried to take the documents." Tabitha rushed to the display. The glass had been tampered with, but the parchments were still there. "That was a warning," Edwina said. "They won't wait much longer." Colonel Blight emerged with his saber drawn. "I've cornered a suspect in the conservatory. Claims to be a cousin of Bellamy." They followed him and found a young man with strikingly similar features to the late Bellamy, albeit with more perspiration and less fork. "My name is Sebastian Bellamy," he said in heavily accented English. "Claude was my brother." "And why are you here now?" "He sent word weeks ago. Said he had proof that titles in England and Canada were being sold, manipulated by gamblers and politicians. He wanted to expose them." Lewis looked at him with sudden recognition. "You were at Ascot 2 summers ago. The Spanish trainer." "I was. Claude said Maplewood was where the trail ended." Tabitha stepped forward. "You said trail ended. Past tense." Sebastian met her gaze. "Because now they will kill again." Midnight struck. The ballroom went silent, and the chandelier swayed. Edwina took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate tradition, elegance, and clarity. In that spirit, I reveal these documents." The glass case shattered. The lights went out, and someone screamed again. The mystery was no longer content to ride in on horseback. It was dancing among them now. Chapter 7. Unmaskings and Unravelings. The lights flickered back on in Maplewood Manor's ballroom. Guests blinked in confusion, a few screamed again for good measure, and one baronet fainted into the punch bowl with a splash. On the marble floor near the shattered glass case lay Mrs. Lively, a socialite with a fondness for secrets and sequins. She clutched her side, blood staining her gloves. "I'm fine," she gasped. "Someone pushed me as I reached for the case. They wore gloves. Smelled of furniture polish." Edwina, flanked by Tabitha and Horatio, ushered everyone back. "No one leaves, not until we sort this." Constable Nibbs, who had been enjoying a particularly plump profiterole, stumbled forward and produced a notebook. "I will begin a list." Sebastian examined the broken case. "The documents are still here, but this was meant as distraction." Lewis nodded grimly. "They knew we would announce something tonight. They feared exposure." Wellington the cat, unfazed by the commotion, leaped onto the dais and sat on the documents. "Well, that's settled then," muttered Horatio. Tabitha pointed toward the conservatory. "If the attacker fled, there may be evidence outside." They hurried into the moonlit conservatory. Among shattered pots and upturned ferns, they found a glove, leather, lined in gold brocade. Tabitha sniffed it. "Furniture polish. And lavender. Lady Plunkett wears lavender, Edwina said. Back in the ballroom, Plunkett was already half defending herself. Lavender is common. Half the village smells like sachets. I was dancing with the vicar. Which one? Asked Tobias. The drunk one, she replied. Meanwhile, Sebastian found a torn scrap of paper tucked into his coat pocket, slipped there during the blackout. It read, "You are next." They must know who I am, he whispered. Then we must make them think they've won, Edwina declared. We leak a fake version of the documents. See who reacts. And watch them come out of hiding to destroy the real ones, Tabitha added. I'll prepare a forgery, Sebastian offered. My brother taught me well. Louis looked at him, then at Edwina. These will flush them out, but we need bait. Horatio grunted. You mean someone they want to silence? Everyone turned to Edwina. Oh, splendid, she said dryly. I do love being popular. We announce tomorrow that you'll present the documents to the Crown, Louis suggested, publicly, at the train station. And we watch who tries to stop it, Tabitha concluded. Wellington mewed in approval. The next morning, the village buzzed with news of the documents and Edwina's impending presentation. Children drew pictures of thunder in tiny hats. Rumors flew faster than pigeons at a fair. As Edwina prepared her speech, Louis stood beside her, eyes scanning every shadow. They will come, he said, but so will justice. Edwina smiled. Then let us dress accordingly, for court or combat. And the final trap was laid. Chapter 8. A station, a standoff, and a scandal revealed. The Maplewood train station had never seen such bustle. Normally home to sleepy postal deliveries and chickens wandering off the platform, it now bristled with curiosity seekers, whispering gentry, and at least 2 reporters scribbling furiously in shorthand. At the center of it all stood Edwina Featherstone, dressed in imperial blue and radiating the sort of poise typically reserved for queens or courtroom dramas. Beside her stood Tabitha, fanning herself with a list of suspects. Louis Calderon's eyes sweeping the crowd. Colonel Blight, gloved and saber-hilt ready. And Sebastian Bellamy, clutching the forgery documents like they might explode. Where are the children? Edwina asked. With the governess, Horatio replied. She threatened them with Latin. They're silent now. Wellington the cat had evaded all authority and perched upon a luggage scale, looking unamused. A brass band played an ill-advised march. The clock struck noon. Edwina stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Today we present evidence regarding recent forgeries, conspiracies, and acts of deadly deception. A shot rang out. Chaos erupted. Louis tackled Edwina to the ground. Horatio threw a tray at the brass band. Tabitha dove behind a sandwich cart. The bullet had missed, but only barely, embedded in the lectern. From the far side of the platform, a cloaked figure ran. Sebastian shouted, That's him! Amos, the stable boy, popped up from behind a stack of crates. He went that way! Louis sprinted, vaulting crates with unexpected flair. The crowd parted. Edwina, brushing dust off her skirts, calmly adjusted her brooch. Minutes later, Louis returned, dragging a limping man whose coat bore traces of lavender polish. "The furniture-smelling victim," Tabitha whispered. "I knew it." "The furniture-smelling villain." The man struggled. "I was paid to silence him. Bellamy knew too much. He was going to name them. Hawthorne, Plunkett, and even a duke from the Ascot Circle. He said they forged bloodlines and gambled on heirs like horses." The crowd gasped. The mayor choked on a biscuit. Sebastian stepped forward. "My brother was going to blow it all open. He hid the real documents for protection." Edwina nodded. "And now we retrieve them." Lewis held up a slip of paper found in the man's pocket. A map. "Eating between the old race stables," he said. "But just." Constable Nibs declared, "I shall confiscate it honorably." The crowd applauded as if it were theater. A child handed Wellington a rosette. Later that evening, back at Maplewood Manor, the true documents were laid out. They named names, showed proof of lineage manipulation, bribed officiants, and falsified titles. "Some of these go back decades," Tabitha said, awed. "And some are very current," Edwina murmured, "including Plunkett and Hawthorne." "What happens next?" Sebastian asked. "Now," Edwina said, "we decide who deserves to keep their seat at the table." Lewis added, "And who deserves a cell?" Colonel Blight raised a glass. "To justice served, and scandal perfectly brewed." The room clinked glasses. Even Wellington meowed. The mystery was no longer riding. It was galloping toward its final reckoning. Chapter 9. The Confession and the Crown. 2 days after the train station debacle, Maplewood Manor received a visitor of the kind that sent the village into either hysterics or hiding. A royal emissary. He arrived in a carriage so polished it reflected the scandal still clinging to the hedgerows, escorted by guards who looked suspiciously like actors from a touring Shakespeare troupe. "Madam Featherstone," the emissary inquired, bowing deeply, "Her Majesty has taken great interest in recent equine developments." "She does enjoy horses and justice," Edwina replied with matching solemnity. They convened in the library. Sebastian, Lewis, Tabitha, and Horatio joined her, with Wellington perched atop a bust of Socrates. The emissary placed a velvet pouch on the table. Inside, a ring bearing the royal crest. "This grants you full authority to proceed," he said. "Her Majesty believes light disinfects." "And gossip travels faster," Tabitha added. Edwina rose. "Then we move forward." The next morning, in the village hall, Edwina stood before an assembly of nobles, villagers, and more reporters than chairs. "We have discovered evidence of forged titles, manipulated bloodlines, and dangerous conspiracies stretching from Ascot to our very own Maplewood." Gasps. The vicar spilled communion wine. "These documents," she held up the originals, "will be handed to the Crown. Those implicated will face inquiry." Lady Plunkett fainted. Again. Lord Hawthorne simply adjusted his monocle and muttered, "Well played." Sebastian stepped forward. "My brother died to reveal the truth. I only hope his name will be remembered more nobly than it was used." "It will," Edwina promised. "This village stood at a crossroads. It chose integrity." Outside, children sang a tuneless but enthusiastic anthem they had composed entirely about Thunder the horse. Later, the emissary handed over an envelope. Inside, an invitation. Her Majesty requests your presence at Ascot. There will be a tribute race and a reward. Lewis arched a brow. Will there be cake? Several, the emissary confirmed. Edwina smiled. Then Maplewood rides again. And thus the troop galloped not just to the crown, but into history. Chapter 10 of Train, Tickets, Tension, and Tea Leaks. Preparations for the upcoming journey to Ascot were underway, but peace was not so easily packed away with the traveling cloaks. Maplewood may have survived the scandal, but it had not yet understood it. What precisely is one meant to wear to meet royalty over horse-based fraud? Horatio mused, examining a hat with 2 feathers too many. Something with both dignity and a hidden pocket, Edwina replied, scanning a letter that had just arrived. Tabitha burst into the parlor with ink on her chin. Someone leaked the wrong version of the documents to the Tavistock Times. They're claiming Thunder was secretly owned by an exiled princess. Lewis looked up from polishing his boots. That's not even the correct conspiracy. It's colorful, Sebastian added. And dangerously misleading, Edwina said. This suggests someone still wants the truth buried beneath fantasy. Outside, Tobias and Ruby chased Wellington with a tiny crown they intended to glue to his head. Potts entered with a telegram. Urgent, ma'am. From a Mr. Rigsby in York. Says he has information about the real heir to the Ascot estate, and a fondness for peppermint creams. Edwina read it, then stood. We must detour to York. The story isn't finished. Tabitha blinked. You're saying there's another heir? Or someone pretending to be one, Lewis said. Either way, it could destabilize everything we've just repaired. And we simply cannot allow peppermint to become the flavor of treachery, Edwina concluded. Within the hour, bags were repacked, horses readied, and tickets booked on the next northbound train. As the station faded behind them, Edwina turned to the others. If this is a footnote, we'll find the period. If it's a new chapter, we'll write it. Hopefully with fewer bullets this time, Horatio muttered. Tabitha held up her notebook. Always be prepared. I brought 3 pens and a tin of sardines. Sebastian smiled. Then we are ready. Maplewood was not done with mystery. It had simply taken an intermission for tea. And the next 5 chapters are done. What do you guys think so far? We've got royalty, we've got mystery, we've got intrigue, and, of course, a cat named Wellington who keeps on showing up everywhere. Will he show up in York? I guess we'll find out soon. As a reminder to everyone, you can go and pick up this book on Amazon. It is available out there for you. If you happen to be a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you can pick up the book on Kindle Unlimited and make sure that you are reading along with us. Reading along in Kindle Unlimited or buying the book, of course, supports the author and, of course, supports her donating to charity as well, which, we're all about. Also, if you have not done so, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. Help me to continue to do this of, supporting new authors and supporting just books that are worth reading so that way we can spend some time together. Your likes and subscribes help me to grow the channel and helps me to continue to support this as we move forward. All right, guys, are you ready? Time for us to jump into the next 5 chapters. Here we go. Chapter 11. York, Yarns, and a Yank with a Secret. The train pulled into York with a wheeze and a jolt, as if it too was exhausted by intrigue. Fog hung over the platform like a curtain waiting to rise. Very theatrical, Edwina noted, descending the steps in boots entirely unsuited for cobblestones. Waiting for them was Mr. Rigsby, a tall man with a beard that had aspirations of wizardry. He wore tweed, smelled faintly of peppermint creams, and was nervously juggling a box labeled Confidential and a thermos of tomato soup. "Are you the woman with the horse murder scandal?" he asked. "Not quite," Edwina replied, "but close." Rigsby led them through twisting streets to a cluttered study above a bakery. "Everything changed when the letters started. They were unsigned but postmarked from a hamlet outside Leeds. Claimed an American heir to the Ascot fortune had been overlooked. A sailor turned sugar tycoon. And now his grandson is here," Tabitha guessed. Rigsby opened the box. Inside were letters, photographs, and a locket containing a striking miniature. A young man who bore a resemblance to Claude Bellamy. "He calls himself Frank Bell," Rigsby said. "He's been asking questions. About the Duke. About you." "Is he here now?" Lewis asked. Rigsby nodded. "In town. Says he's heading to Ascot to claim what's his." Sebastian looked pale. "If he's another Bellamy, we could be in deeper trouble." "Or," Edwina said, lifting a letter to the light, "we could have another ally." They tracked Frank Bell to a nearby inn called the Black Pudding and found him in the lounge, sipping tea like a man trying very hard not to sip whiskey. "Can I help you folks?" he said in a smooth Missouri drawl. Edwina sat across from him. "You've been writing letters, stirring questions, claiming heritage." Frank smiled. "Or maybe just chasing ghosts. My grandfather was Claude's half-brother. They wrote each other, then stopped. I'm here to find out why." Lewis raised an eyebrow. "Do you know what Claude was involved in?" "Not all of it," Frank said, "but enough to know somebody killed him, and I want the truth." Tabitha exchanged a glance with Edwina. "Then perhaps we work together." Frank leaned back. "I'm good at poker, and worse at diplomacy, but I got a head for puzzles, and a strong dislike for aristocrats who think they're above the law." "You'll fit in splendidly," Edwina said. And just like that, their group grew larger, and the mystery deeper. Outside, the fog rolled on. In York, the past wasn't buried. It had simply crossed the Atlantic for answers. Chapter 12. Carriages, Codes, and a Curious Disguise. They left York the next morning, their party now 1 Missourian stronger and several scones heavier. Frank Bell proved a quick study, especially where British etiquette met investigative loopholes. "Your hats are absurd, but your law books are brilliant," he remarked, scanning an 1872 statute on inheritance rights. Back aboard the train to Ascot, Tabitha noticed a man trailing them through the third-class carriage. He was small, balding, and wore a scarf that matched the hawthorn livery. "That's not subtle," she whispered. Lewis moved to intercept him. only for the man to disappear between cars. "We've stirred the hive again," Edwina muttered, "and the bees wear cravats." At Ascot, they checked into the same inn used for the royal meeting. Frank insisted on tipping everyone with American dimes and confused the bellhop by offering to pay in molasses. That evening, a note appeared under Edwina's door. "Stop digging, or be buried with your findings." She placed it on the tea tray. "Do add this to your growing collection of death threats, Potts." "Shall I alphabetize them, madam?" The next day, they attended a public lecture on equine bloodlines, disguised with false mustaches, Horatio's idea, and oversized bonnets, Tabitha's contribution. The speaker, a dour man named Dr. Stratfield, mentioned offhand a shipment of falsified horse pedigrees intercepted last month in Dover. Frank leaned over. "What if that shipment wasn't destroyed? What if someone kept it as leverage?" Tabitha scribbled furiously. "A forgery ring. Not just for nobles. Horses, too. That would explain everything." "If horses could talk," Sebastian muttered, "they'd be blackmailing us all." That night, they broke into the offices of the Ascot Jockey Guild, guided by Amos's cousin Lottie, a stable girl with lock-picking fingers and a fondness for jam. "I saw men sneaking crates last month," Lottie said. "Smelled like varnish and vinegar. One had a fancy watch." Inside the dusty storeroom, they uncovered sealed ledgers and crates of documents labeled Equine Credentials, Private. Tabitha flipped open a ledger. "These are payments. Names, bribes, Hawthorne, Plunkett, even a minor German prince." "And this," Frank said, pulling a folded blueprint from a crate, "is the design for a racehorse tattooing tool used to fake lineage marks." Lewis closed the crate. "We are not just dealing with scandal. This is organized fraud." Edwina looked around at her unlikely team. "Then we expose it. Thoroughly, eloquently, and possibly with cake." The door creaked. They froze. Wellington the cat entered, tail held high as if to say, "You're not done yet." Chapter 13. Gatecrashers, Gambits, and Ginger Scones. The discovery in the Jockey Guild sent ripples through their party. But ripples were not enough. They needed waves, and the perfect occasion arrived sooner than expected. An invitation, gilded and suspiciously perfumed, arrived from Lady Constance Fitzmaurice, announcing her annual Gala of Gallops, a gathering of Ascot's most influential, including race owners, lords, duchesses, and a man simply listed as the Marquis of Who. "We're not invited," Tabitha said, squinting at the envelope. "Then we must attend," Edwina replied. The group divided their tasks. Tabitha and Frank forged entry credentials. Lottie and Amos acquired uniforms from the catering staff, and Lewis rehearsed the cover story. Something involving pastries, royal lineage, and a goat that never actually existed. The gala itself sparkled with chandeliers, string quartets, and suspiciously opulent centerpieces. Edwina swept in under the guise of Lady Ashthorne of Devon, with Horatio as her foreign cousin. "Spanish Swiss with a hint of Norwegian," Lewis suggested. Frank passed as an American race investor, and Tabitha declared herself Lady Penelope's genealogical liaison. They split up to listen, flirt, and investigate. Lewis overheard two stablemasters speaking in hushed tones. The German prince is furious the horse lost. Says he was guaranteed a win. You think they're using the ink stamp again? Tabitha charmed her way into the archives wing, where she found a ledger showing unusual payment transfers, some leading to familiar names. Frank caught a woman in a green veil whispering in French to a man who quickly exited through the servants' corridor. Meanwhile, Edwina found herself cornered by Lady Plunkett. "I know what you're doing," Plunkett hissed. "You can't stop the wheel, darling, but you can be crushed beneath it." "I prefer to redirect it entirely," Edwina replied sweetly, biting into a ginger scone. Plunkett flinched as Tabitha appeared beside her. "Lovely party. Do you know it's technically treason to counterfeit royal breeding registries?" "Prove it," Plunkett said. "That's the plan," Tabitha said, producing a napkin with a fingerprint in saddle wax. Outside, Frank and Lewis cornered the man in the servant corridor, the same Hawthorne-affiliated saboteur from the train. "Tell us who's funding it," Lewis demanded. "You think it's just nobles? It's a syndicate. Gambling houses, shipping tycoons. They don't bet on horses, they bet on futures." Frank scowled. "Well, you just ran into ours." The gala ended in a blaze of music and false niceties. As they regrouped under moonlight, Edwina declared, "They know we're close, and now we know where to press." Tabitha held up a stolen card. "Private syndicate meeting, Blackbridge Hall, midnight." "Then that," Edwina said, slipping the card into her glove, "is where the next hoofprint lands." Wellington the cat, having stowed away in the punch bowl carriage, blinked approvingly. The game wasn't over. It had merely shifted tracks. Chapter 14. Midnight, Misdirection, and the Map of Lies. Blackbridge Hall loomed in the fog like a guilty conscience. Expensive, imposing, and in need of more windows cleaned. "It's a kind of place where secret societies meet to decide the price of marmalade," Frank whispered. "Or horses," Lewis added, "and who gets to race them?" The team arrived just before midnight, dressed in the shadows of stable hands, surveyors, and clerks. Lottie led the way through a hedge gap known only to locals and foxes. Inside, under chandeliers dimmed for atmosphere, the syndicate gathered. Industrialists, foreign investors, disgraced nobility, and at least one viscount who was also a bookie. Tabitha and Frank took up position near the archives. Edwina and Horatio blended into the crowd. Lewis stationed himself by the door. Lady Plunkett arrived in crimson, her expression carved from ice. At the dais, a man in a silver mask addressed the group. "We have been exposed. Maplewood stirred the dust, but we endure. Tonight we decide who protects the plan and who costs too much." A ledger was opened, names listed, votes taken by hand gestures. Someone was removed from the room. "That," Edwina murmured, "was not democracy." Meanwhile, Tabitha slipped into a side office and discovered a map, hand-drawn, coded, and stamped with racing crests. It outlined farms and estates used to house falsified horses. Next to one location, Thunder, original. She froze. Frank peered over her shoulder. "They cloned Thunder's papers, used his name, his reputation." Lewis whispered over the comms wire they'd rigged via teacups and copper. "They're moving crates toward a garage. I see ink barrels." Outside, Lottie and Amos blocked the back lane with a goat cart. "This is a vegetable emergency," Amos declared to the driver. The man swore in Hungarian. Back inside, Edwina stepped forward as if to ask a question, then knocked over a wine decanter onto the map table. "Oh dear, Butterfingers," she said as the room lurched. Lewis used the distraction to pocket documents. Plunkett hissed, "I'll have you arrested." "Try it," Edwina replied, "but I imagine the Crown frowns on syndicates." With a blast from a borrowed whistle and the cry of "Fire in the cellar!" they made their escape. Back at their lodgings, the team spread out the stolen map. "This," Tabitha said, "is the blueprint of a scandal. A whole network. And Thunder wasn't the only horse." Sebastian circled a name. That's where Claude last traveled before his death." Frank leaned back. "Then that's our next stop." Wellington sneezed on the map, and then lay directly over it. "Very well," Edwina sighed. "We leave at dawn, provided Wellington permits it." And the chase galloped on. Chapter 15. Thunder Rains Twice. The morning after the Black Bridge escape dawned damp and dramatic. Edwina stood at the edge of the stables with a fresh map, tea in one hand and irritation in the other. "They copied Thunder," she muttered. "Copied him, as if one noble horse weren't enough to rattle the Empire." The team prepared for travel. Their next destination, Crosley Hollow, a remote training estate circled on the coded map, where Claude Bellamy had reportedly last been seen, and where Thunder Original was scribbled in ink. Frank checked the saddlebag. Extra biscuits, rope, bribe money, and one mysterious apple. We're ready. "Don't eat the apple," Tabitha warned. "It could be symbolic." Lewis secured a pair of binoculars. "The hollow is protected. If they're hiding horses, they're hiding other things too." By afternoon, they arrived via a hired cart that smelled of ambition and onions. Crosley Hollow was a grim estate, too neat to be abandoned, too quiet to be honest. Wellington the cat leaped down and promptly disappeared. They split into pairs. Frank and Tabitha surveyed the outer barn, where they found a black stallion nearly identical to the Duke of Thunder. "It's uncanny," Frank whispered. "But look, his blaze is slightly off-center." Inside, Lewis and Edwina discovered boxes of labeled inks, hot iron tools, and ledgers cross-referencing names, stables, and altered papers. "This is their headquarters," Lewis said. "The engine room of the Deception." Tabitha opened one ledger. "Claude's name is here, right before it stops. No record of what happened next." They regrouped by the paddock. "They trained horses here under false names, then swapped their records before races," Sebastian explained. "It's a shell game." "And it made someone very rich," Edwina added, "and Claude very dead." Suddenly, a low whistle echoed across the field. Men appeared at the tree line, 5 of them. One held a whip, another a rifle. "You're trespassing," one barked. "We're investigating," Edwina replied, "and you're armed on Crown property. Shall we compare sins?" The man with the rifle stepped forward. "You're Featherstone. They said you'd be trouble." Frank grinned. And they were right. A fight nearly broke out, until Lewis whistled. From behind, Wellington reappeared, leapt onto a barrel, and knocked it straight into the rifleman's legs. In the chaos, the team scattered. Tabitha and Sebastian locked the barn. Frank and Edwina secured the ledgers. Louis ran interference, literally with a rake. Within minutes, the intruders retreated. One dropped a notebook. Inside, shipping schedules, names, and the phrase, "Final drop, Hastings, Friday." Edwina straightened. "Then we ride again." Wellington meowed triumphantly. The fake thunder watched silently from the paddock, his gaze calm. But it was clear only one Duke would reign in the end. And the next 5 down. Are you guys enjoying the reading? Are you having fun? I hope so. You got me switching accents back and forth all over the place. Because, believe it or not, like Canada back in the 1800s had a British accent, which is why that's where I've got there. Then we've got Sebastian and Louis, and now we put in the Missouri guy, and just all over the place, keeping me on my toes. I like it. Should always keep me on my toes. My toes are where I live. All right, guys. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat. If not, make sure that you have subscribed to my channel and you've considered supporting our author, Anna Rowe, and her debut novel, Murder at Maplewood Manor. Now, let's get ourselves started into the next 5, shall we? And just so you guys are, in case you guys are wondering, we are not going to finish this book tonight. There are a total of 70 chapters in here. So, we'll see how far we get, but maybe we get up to about 35, get halfway through, and then maybe on the next stream we finish the other half. Let's see how it goes tonight, shall we? All right. Let's jump in. It may even be that it takes us 3 streams to get through this. Find out. I'm gunning for about 2 hours worth of reading tonight, so we'll see. Here we go. Chapter 16, The Hastings Heist and the Duchess's Diary. The seaside air in Hastings was briny, brisk, and, as Frank pointed out, full of opportunities to slip on kelp and embarrass oneself publicly. They arrived posing as the Featherstone Equine Restoration Society, a fiction of Edwina's invention so elaborate it had a crest. It features a boot, monocle, and a disappointed goose, Tabitha noted. Their target was a warehouse near the docks, marked in the smuggler's notebook. Shipments moved in and out with a rhythm that suggested military precision, or very dedicated criminals. The final drop is scheduled tonight, Louis confirmed, scanning the harbor through opera glasses. We wait for the signal. Inside the warehouse, a group of men loaded crates marked as vintage sherry, which, upon closer examination via Tabitha's impromptu reconnaissance, contained papers, ledgers, and, oddly, horse blankets embroidered with fake lineage signals. Meanwhile, Edwina visited the Duchess of Wintermere, a recluse known for her devotion to miniature horses and outrageous gossip. She was bedridden, but thrilled to host. "Claude Bellamy? Oh, he dined here twice," she wheezed. "Charming fellow. Smelled of cinnamon and intrigue." The Duchess produced her diary. "Here, April 6th. Bellamy mentioned a letter from Canada. Said if anything happened to him, it was not an accident." "May I borrow this page?" Edwina asked politely. "Of course, dear. It's only history until you turn it into a scandal." Back at the docks, the operation commenced. Frank and Louis posed as inspectors. Amos and Lottie played dockside errand runners, slipping messages via sandwich wrappings. Wellington patrolled the crates. At the stroke of 9, a whistle blew. The team moved fast. "You there," Lewis barked. "Open that crate. We have orders from the Admiralty." The men hesitated. Tabitha and Sebastian arrived with false credentials and a wheelbarrow of urgency. Frank pried open a crate. Inside, documents. Dozens of counterfeit racing titles, stamped and sorted. Then footsteps. Plunkett, Hawthorne, and 2 men in gray, clearly syndicate enforcers. "You just couldn't leave it alone," Hawthorne said. "That's the thing about truth," Edwina replied, emerging from the shadows. "It has an awfully loud neigh." Wellington leaped onto a crate. Everybody froze. "Now," said Tabitha, "we'd appreciate your cooperation, unless you'd rather explain all this to the Home Secretary." One of the gray-suited men lunged. A scuffle. A crate toppled. Papers flew like snow. And when the dust settled, the evidence was theirs. "You've ruined years of planning," Plunkett growled. "Then you should have planned for us," Frank replied. They handed the evidence to the arriving constables, alerted earlier by Potts via emergency pigeon. "I trained it myself," Potts beamed. "Named him Sir Flapsalot." As dawn crept over Hastings, the team gathered for breakfast. "That," Edwina said, pouring tea, "was our most successful heist not involving silverware." Tabitha opened the Duchess's diary. "And now we have proof Claude knew the danger. He tried to stop it." Sebastian nodded. "Then we finish what he started." Lewis passed around jam. "One question remains. If this was the final drop, what was the first?" Wellington purred. The game was nearly over, but it wasn't done just yet. Chapter 17. Loose Ends and a Letter from the Queen. The return to Maplewood was less triumphant procession and more exhausted tumble. Luggage, documents, Wellington, and at least one suspicious jar of marmalade all arrived in a heap. Edwina settled back into the manor like a duchess returning from a particularly scandalous sabbatical. "We've toppled a syndicate, restored a horse's name, and thwarted a marquis," she sighed. "All before the Queen's summer garden party." The townsfolk had prepared a welcome. Children with felt horse masks, a pie competition, and a banner that read, "Thank you for exposing international corruption." "Bit wordy," Tabitha murmured. They held a modest celebration in the garden. Lewis baked something unpronounceable but delicious. Frank told increasingly dramatic tales of the Hastings heist, each time adding another saboteur. Then a letter arrived. Royal seal, hand-delivered. Potts bowed as he presented it. "From Her Majesty herself." Edwina read it aloud. "Lady Featherstone and companions, your discretion, courage, and fortitude have restored honor to the realm of racing and beyond. Your service is hereby noted with gratitude, and your invitation to the Royal Ascot Tribute Gala stands. The Duke of Thunder shall lead the opening procession. P.S. Do bring Wellington. The Queen is most curious." The garden erupted in applause. Wellington licked his paw, unimpressed. Later, Edwina stood at her writing desk. "Claude Bellamy's final letter deserves an answer," she said. "A reply not just of words, but of action. Tabitha placed a forged title next to the real one. What do we do with all this? We publish, Sebastian said. All of it. Frank nodded. Sunlight, like my mother's chili, is the best disinfectant. Lewis added, and we prepare. Syndicates are like weeds. Cut them once, they grow back cleverer. Wellington purred in agreement. As the sun set over Maplewood, the team toasted not an end, but a beginning. And somewhere, deep in the royal archives, a clerk opened a new file. Maplewood Affairs. Ongoing. Chapter 18. Royal Ribbons and Revelations at Ascot. Ascot shimmered like a gilded dream. Royal banners fluttered. Brass bands tooted with military grandeur. Nobility and scandal alike shimmered beneath elaborate hats. Maplewood's mischief makers had arrived. Edwina, in a gown of dusky rose and a hat so wide it required spatial negotiation, surveyed the crowds. Beside her stood Tabitha, wielding a lorgnette and wearing a gown made entirely from reclaimed upholstery, and Lewis, dressed with quiet precision and carrying a pocket watch that had absolutely no intention of telling time. Frank wore a cutaway coat and a bolo tie, boldly ignoring tradition. Sebastian had polished his boots so vigorously they nearly blinded an earl. And Wellington the cat. Oh, Wellington. He rode into Ascot not in a crate, but in a velvet-lined basket balanced atop the Duke of Thunder. Children cheered, dames sniffed. Someone fainted, possibly from the hats. A footman approached. The Queen will receive you following the procession. She's requested, your feline companion be brushed. He brushes himself, Edwina replied with pride. The tribute race was grand. Thunder, carrying no rider, led the parade like the aristocrat he was. Behind him followed a selection of the finest horses in the Commonwealth, including the restored original Thunder from Crowsley Hollow, now renamed Echo. Fitting name, Tabitha murmured. He's not a fraud, he's a warning. As the horses rounded the first bend, a commotion near the royal box caught Frank's eye. Two men were arguing, one in livery, the other in a sharp gray suit. Lewis squinted. That's the men from Blackbridge. And the other, Sebastian whispered, was at Crowdsley. Tabitha tugged Edwina's sleeve. They're still here, watching. Edwina smiled without moving her lips. Then let them watch. We're not just solving a crime. We're rewriting the rules. After the race, they were summoned. The Queen's drawing room was tasteful, velvet-scented, and surprisingly cat-friendly. Her Majesty greeted them with warmth and a subtle smirk. I hear you've uncovered more rot than most of my gardeners. We do our best, Edwina said, curtsying. And I understand you plan to publish. Every truth, Tabitha said, even the inconvenient ones. The Queen nodded. Let the scandal be a lesson, and the solution an example. You've done the realm a great service. She turned to Wellington. And you, Sir Whiskers. Wellington sneezed on her shoe. She laughed. Knight him immediately. Outside, thunderclouds began to gather. Not the Duke, but weather. Still, the celebration pressed on. Frank raised a glass. To the truth, and those brave enough to chase it. Lewis added, to the horses who ran, the friends who stayed. And Edwina added, "To the future, mysterious, maddening, magnificent." They clinked glasses, thunder neighed, and somewhere in the shadows, the next mystery began to stir. Chapter 19. Maplewood Midsummer and the Whisper in the Wall. The glory of Ascot lingered in the minds of the villagers, but Maplewood itself was not one to sit idle on a laurel, especially not when the flower beds were in bloom and the postman had begun wearing cologne. Edwina returned to her manor with a new knighthood for her cat, 3 floral arrangements from mysterious admirers, and a sense that peace wouldn't last. "Something is off," she said one morning, sniffing her tea. "The marmalade is too cheerful." Louis raised an eyebrow. "Is that a symptom of paranoia or prophecy?" Tabitha, sorting correspondence, held up a letter with no seal and handwriting that looked like it had been written mid-gallop. "Meet at the church ruins. Tonight. Bring no one. Tell no one. What we began was never finished." Frank took it. "Either a ghost or someone who wants us to think they are." Sebastian frowned. "The ruins are where Claude once met with a lawyer, before his last journey." "Then we go," Edwina said, "and we absolutely tell everyone." That night, under a moon both full and suspiciously theatrical, the team approached the crumbling church outside the village. Wellington led the way. Inside, the air was cool and still. A faint glow flickered by the altar. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, wrapped in a wool coat despite the warmth. "Lady Featherstone," the voice rasped, "you should not have come." "You invited me," she said. "Not alone. Not with them." Tabitha stepped forward. "We're all in this." The man stepped into the light. He was older than they had expected, silver-haired, eyes wary. "Name's Amos Bell, Claude's uncle. I helped him forge the first documents, and I've been hiding ever since." Louis blinked. "You're the start of the chain." Amos nodded. "I didn't know what it would become. We wanted to level the field. What they did was a game, but it became war." He handed over a packet. "This is what Claude was going to use. It names the earliest deals, the men who backed it, before it got paid under golden nobility." Edwina accepted it with care. "Why now?" "Because I want it to end. And you may be the only ones left who care about ending it properly." Frank gave a slow nod. "Then let's end it with the truth." Amos faded into the shadows, leaving behind only a lantern and the scent of bitter pipe tobacco. Back at the manor, Edwina unwrapped the packet. Inside, letters, contracts, and a faded photograph of young Claude standing beside Thunder, his expression defiant. Tabitha tapped the photo. "That's our story. That's our final chapter." Edwina shook her head. "No, that's our next beginning." And the bell at Maplewood struck midnight. Chapter 20. Tea, Truth, and the Thunder Legacy. The following morning dawned with a golden hush, as if even the birds had agreed to let Edwina think. She sat in the library, a dozen documents spread before her. The photograph of Claude and Thunder rested near the teapot like a silent witness. "It's all here," Tabitha whispered. "Names, dates, the first bribes, The first lies. Frank leaned over the table. And look at this. Amos signed over the title to a horse that never existed. A phantom racer. They placed bets, won thousands, and no one ever saw the animal. Lewis nodded. Fraud by fiction. A ghost thoroughbred. Clever. Corrupt. Sebastian added, and Claude wanted to undo it all, not just because he regretted it, but because he knew who they'd hurt. There was a knock. Potts entered with a tray of letters and a newspaper. Madam, he said gravely, you're in the Times. On the front page, Featherstone files to Rock Racing World. Edwina read aloud. An anonymous source claims Lady Featherstone and her companions are preparing to release a detailed account of racing corruption spanning decades. So much for subtlety, she muttered. They know. Wellington pawed at a ledger. That's the thing about cats, Lewis noted. They always know where to land. Tabitha gathered the papers. We take it to London, to the Royal Commission, with Wellington as mascot and Thunder as witness. Frank smiled. One last ride. By late afternoon, the carriage was packed. Thunder snorted proudly as the team boarded. Along the road, villagers waved them off, children holding makeshift banners, and the baker tossing cherry scones from the steps. In London, they were met with scrutiny, skepticism, and, after Lewis flexed his legalese, an official hearing date. The night before the testimony, they gathered in a small drawing room near Parliament. The packet lay on the table between them. We could vanish now, Sebastian said. No one would blame us. But history would forget us, Tabitha replied, and Claude deserves better. Frank lifted a glass. To the man who started it, and to the friends who finish it. Edwina raised her own. To Thunder, the real one, who ran faster than lies. And outside, in a modest London stable, the Duke of Thunder neighed into the night. The storm was coming, but this time they were riding into it. All right, guys, the next 5 down. So, we are about a third of the way through the book, give or take. Are you enjoying it? Is it a mystery for you? Do you know what is coming next? Are you Wellington the cat? Do you know who put the bop in the bop shabop shabop? Who put the ram in the ramalama ding dong? Who put the dip in the dip to dip to dip? Who was that man? I'd like to shake his hand. All right, guys, here we go. Let's dive into the next 5. Again, I encourage you guys to chat amongst yourselves. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, anything else, put those into chat. Here we go, guys. The next. Chapter 21. Thunder in the House of Lords. The Royal Commission convened under stone arches, velvet drapes, and expressions so grave they could curdle clotted cream. Edwina entered first, chin high, a reticule of documents clasped in her gloved hand. Wellington padded beside her like a diplomat. Behind her came Tabitha, Sebastian, Frank, and Lewis, each with notes, nerves, and an unshakable sense of purpose. Thunder was stabled nearby, having already charmed half the palace guards. A Lord Chancellor rose. Lady Featherstone, you claim this horse, Duke of Thunder, was at the center of a decades-long fraud. Not the horse, my lord, Edwina replied calmly. The people who tried to ride his name for profit. Tabitha laid out the ledgers. Sebastian produced Claude's letters. Frank presented the forged lineage stamps. And Louis delivered a speech so elegant, even the press took notes. Wellington sat upon the bench with the quiet dignity of a judge. Across the aisle sat figures from the racing syndicates, sweating in their silk. Lord Hawthorne glared. Lady Plunkett refused to make eye contact. You forged bloodlines, Edwina said, looking straight at them. You silenced whistleblowers. You made noble sport into a casino. And we're returning the winnings, Tabitha added, to history, to justice. The hearing lasted hours. Testimonies, rebuttals. Even the Queen's emissary arrived with a sealed letter confirming royal endorsement. As the commission adjourned, murmurs of respect swept through the chamber. That evening, Edwina and her team stood in Parliament Square. We've done it, Sebastian said. We've begun it, Louis corrected. Frank lit a cigar. Think they'll put us in the papers again? If they do, Tabitha said, I hope they spell Wellington's name right. Edwina watched the gaslights flicker across the statue of a long-dead statesman. The world loves a good horse race, she said. We just reminded them to bet on the truth. Thunder whinnied in the distance, and in the quiet that followed, a new history began to gallop forward. Chapter 22. A Garden Party, a Royal Whisper, and one last race. Back in Maplewood, midsummer rolled in with its usual combination of unruly roses and far too ambitious lemonade recipes. The villagers buzzed with news from London. Children reenacted the Royal Commission with cardboard wigs and a goat. Edwina was once again writing letters in the garden, this time of gratitude and decline. So many offers to join boards, committees, and lecture tours. I have no intention of chairing anything that doesn't serve tea and scandal, she told Potts. A letter arrived on pale blue parchment with gold trim. Lady Featherstone, you were invited to the Queen's midsummer garden party at Balmoral as a guest of honor. Please, bring the Duke of Thunder. And the cat? Wellington preened. Thunder whinnied in approval. Well, Tabitha said, holding up a lace parasol, we haven't been banned from Ballamore. That feels like a career milestone. Frank packed a saddlebag with snacks and secret files, just in case. Louis shined his shoes. Sebastian polished his words. Balmoral greeted them with grandeur wrapped in rhododendrons. The Queen herself greeted them beneath a tree that looked like it had once hosted a duel. You've earned this, she said. Now, let's see if Thunder behaves better than my corgis. Wellington promptly sat on the Queen's lap. During the party, a quiet moment arrived. The Queen leaned close to Edwina. You know this is not over, don't you? Edwina sipped her tea. I suspected not. There are whispers, Her Majesty continued, of something deeper, older, and not just in England. Louis, across the lawn, raised a brow. He had overheard. A legacy of mischief and myth. That, Edwina said, sounds exactly like our sort of trouble. As the sun dipped and bagpipes murmured in the distance, the Queen stood. One more thing, she said. Thunder shall lead the ceremonial race this autumn. A true race of honor. No betting, just history. Tabitha clapped. Sebastian smiled. Frank tipped his glass. And Edwina, Lady Featherstone, sleuth, horsewoman, and scandal sifter, rose and bowed. Then we shall ride one last time. Wellington blinked. Thunder stomped. The party cheered. And the story, as stories do, promised just one more twist ahead. Chapter 23. Shadows in the Saddle and Secrets Abroad. The weeks following Balmoral were quiet, deceptively so. Maplewood bloomed, thunder grazed contentedly, and Wellington had taken to sleeping on top of unfiled legal briefs. But the Queen's whisper clung to Edwina like a silk thread caught in her thoughts. Something older, she mused, not just titles and turf. One morning, a letter arrived from Spain. Frank read it aloud, frowning. Senor Bell, you inquired once about your grandfather's time in Cadiz. There are records here, buried ones, of ships, races, and a registry that does not match what you were told. Come soon. Some doors are only open briefly. Lewis set down his teacup. A transatlantic link. Tabitha flipped open her notebook. And possibly the root of the forgery network. What if the syndicate didn't start in England at all? Then it's time we follow the trail, Edwina said. A week later, the team arrived in Cadiz. The sea air was heavy with salt, shouts, and citrus. Their guide, a charming but evasive archivist named Rosario, led them to the old registry vault. The ledgers, she said, were supposed to be destroyed, but I kept them for curiosity. Inside, proof of horse registries, doctored, dating back to the 1770s. A seal from a privateer, and a name scrawled repeatedly. Belmonte. An alias, Sebastian murmured. Claude's grandfather. He came here under a different name. Frank tapped a symbol stamped beside the entries. That's not Spanish. That's Moorish. Tabitha studied it. Not just a forgery ring, a network spanning cultures. A hidden game in plain sight. Rosario handed them a small book. It's a ledger, but also a journal. Someone tried to stop it. They failed. Maybe you won't. That night, on the rooftop of their modest inn, Edwina stood under a full moon. This isn't the epilogue, she said. It's the prologue. Lewis stepped beside her. Are we ready for another storm? Frank grinned. Let's see if Spain can handle thunder. In the stable below, thunder stirred. And far away, a courier galloped through Morocco, with a satchel marked by the same Moorish seal. The past had opened its gates, and the race had begun anew. Chapter 24. Letters, Labyrinths, and the Andalusian Code. Cadiz was no longer just scenic. It was a key. The journal Rosario had given them was densely written in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Arabic. Between faded lines and coded symbols, the team uncovered tales of racing rings, noble alliances, and merchant bets that spanned oceans. This wasn't just about horses, Tabitha said, turning a page. It was about trade, smuggling, influence. The horses were cover. Frank leaned over the diary. Belmonte was at the center of it, but he wasn't the only one. Look here, This Moorish symbol next to the name Al-Hazir. It appears again and again. Lewis traced the markings. It's not a name. It's a place. Or a passage. Sebastian scanned the adjoining map. There's an old estate north of Jerez, deserted now. Used to be a breeding ground, or so the papers claim. Then we go north, Edwina said, before someone else reads this diary. The journey took them past rolling vineyards and whitewashed villages. Locals whispered of horses that vanished in the night, of noble houses that rose and fell without explanation, and of one estate surrounded by silence. La Cuadra de Sombra. Wellington refused a ride in the carriage, and instead perched indignantly on the back of Thunder, who bore it all with regal annoyance. At La Cuadra de Sombra, the gates creaked open as if reluctant. Inside, ivy choked the archways, and fountains stood dry, but the stables, oddly, were swept. Someone's been here, Lewis murmured. In the loft, they found ledgers bound in leather and sealed with wax. One seal matched the symbol from the journey. Inside, names from Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Not just horses, people, agents, brokers, identities assumed and abandoned. The forgery ring had become a trading web. Tabitha found a coded list. These aren't bets, they're exchanges. And look, Thunder appears, next to the name of a French baron. He was sold, Sebastian whispered. His name sold, used as a pawn. Edwina folded the list. And we've just stepped onto their board. Just then, Wellington hissed. A shadow darted past the window. Lewis and Frank rushed outside. No one. But beside the courtyard gate, a note had been pinned with a gold tack. You've gone too far. The past should stay buried. Edwina read it aloud. Then we'll dig deeper. Thunder stomped. The wind shifted. The estate was no longer abandoned, and the truth was no longer sleeping. Chapter 25. The Ride Through the Olive Grove and a Revelation in Ink. Morning at La Cuadra de Sombra was unsettlingly still. A mist hovered just above the ground, and even the birdsong paused when Wellington meowed. Lewis, unable to sleep, had traced the coded list until dawn. These aren't locations, he announced to the bleary-eyed team. They're transfer points, couriers, across Spain, France, Morocco, even Canada. The network's older and bigger than we imagined, Tabitha said, and it's still active. Frank adjusted his hat. Then we ride. They followed one trail marked on the map, a narrow route through olive groves and into a forgotten ravine where, legend said, war horses had once been hidden during the Napoleonic retreat. At midday they found the remains of a courier station, sunken timbers, scorched stone, and a tin canister buried near a faded Moorish crest. Inside the canister, one page, a letter sealed and dated over 70 years earlier. Edwina read it aloud. To whoever follows, if you read this, the game is not over. The horse is a symbol. The bloodlines are real, but the power they protect is older still. Hidden in the ink. Look east. Follow the black stallion. It always returns home. Sebastian ran his fingers over the seal. This wasn't just fraud. It was prophecy. They use racing as a front, but they were guarding something. A legacy, Lewis added. Or a weapon. Wellington batted at the compass. East it is, Frank said. Back at the estate, Rosario had sent a package, a translated copy of an even older ledger, once in the possession of a now extinct French order of noble jockeys. This is madness, Tabitha said, flipping through it. They weren't just breeding horses. They were safeguarding lines of descent, royal and otherwise, for leverage. Edwina looked at the symbol again, the black stallion on parchment. And thunder was the perfect cover. The pieces were converging. Identities, allegiances, blood, ink, and reins. Lewis folded the page into his jacket. Whatever this is, whoever it protects or exposes, is not finished. Edwina nodded. Then neither are we. In the twilight, they past vineyards, through olive trees, and into a world that had never fully left the shadows. And far ahead, just at the edge of sight, a lone black horse stood watching them, waiting. All right, guys, that is 25 chapters down this evening, and I think based on how many chapters we've got in the book, I said there are a total of 70. We're going to call it here for the night. I'm going to get these posted up onto YouTube, so that way if you missed any of the early chapters, you can stop back out there and have a listen to them. Susan, I have not solved it yet either. I'm not sure where we're going next. So let me get these posted up onto YouTube so you guys will, if you missed any part of it, you'll be able to go back and have a listen. Please make sure that you are sharing this with people that you think might be interested in having a listen, as well as, supporting Anna Rowe as the author, and of course, supporting my channel with likes, subscribes, follows, comments, all of those fun things. I hope you guys have enjoyed the story so far. Again, the way it's stacking up to be, I will look at doing probably another 20 to 25 chapters on Tuesday. And then we will look at finishing it up next Saturday. So make sure that you tune in to be able to continue to follow along with the story. And, of course, if you do miss any, youtube.com/@SirArminius, you'll be able to grab all of the chapters that I have read. Other than that, I hope you guys have yourself a fantastic evening, a wonderful Saturday, and thank you so much for coming along to support me and debut author Anna Rowe. Have a great night, everybody. I'll see you guys all again soon.